Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the morning program. We are outdoors today, and looks like we'll be out here for a couple of days. So if you hear the noise in the background, the cars, whatnot going by, that is why. Now, coming up today, we have an interview with Greg Peharie, and you don't want to miss this interview. This is an amazing story, and that's coming up today. And we do want to give you some current events of what's happening around the world first. But before we do that, I pray that you had a good weekend. You know, God bless. He blessed us this weekend. I want to share with you something that happened. Before going to church, I received a video from someone. I started looking at it, and it was talking about analyzing the independent movement among Adventists. And within the video, someone said that Sister White was employed by the General Conference till the day she died, and I did not know that. And maybe she was. Maybe she was an employee. I don't know the history like that. I just did not know that. I don't even know if that's even accurate, but that's what was said in the video, unless I misunderstood. And then also they said that she obeyed the voice of the conference unless it went contrary to the dictates of her conscience, I guess. And I don't think that's the way. I think what she did, she always obeyed the voice of God. And anyway, so I only watched the very beginning part of the video, really, when I heard those two things, and went to church. And what hit me while we're sitting at church, you know, they're talking about the 2030 initiative, you know, where the country is going to be in 2030, and, you know, where's our church going to be? And, you know, and it was talking about coming together with faith and love and evangelism and what, or energy, or whatever it is that they were talking about. And then from all the initiatives, they went to talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ, you know, looking forward to seeing the sea of glass and so forth. And I noticed a lot of churches are talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ. What's not being talked about is the storm that happens right before Christ's coming. There's a storm coming, and no one really is talking about it. Now, maybe people are not convicted that it's coming, or maybe people don't know. I don't know. But there's a storm coming, and people are not talking about it. Now, driving back from church, God put something on my heart. And, you know, he hit me with this. You know, it's not necessarily going to the conference churches that's going to protect us from the storm. It's not necessarily going and visiting independent movements, or some people, you know, I've heard Brother Kerry call it a God-dependent movement. It's not that's going to save you from the storm. What's going to save us from the storm? What's going to protect us from the storm? Let me put it that way. What will protect you from the storm is righteousness by faith. Righteousness by faith, having a Christ-like character, having sin removed out of our lives, will protect you through the storm. That is the ark that we have to build in our day. Noah had to build an ark in his day, and we have to build one in our day. And that ark is perfection of character. That is going to protect us. And it was clear. And then God showed me something. He brought this to my mind. It was Hebrews 11. And let me go there now. Hebrews 11:7. And it says, by faith, if you have a Bible, open this up so you can look at this yourself. We're looking at Hebrews 11, verse 7. and we may go down actually to 8, 9, and 10, but it says, by faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet. So this starts with faith. But it says, he moved with fear. Now, verses 7 and 8 basically say similar things, but they say it in a different way, and it means the same thing. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's just read it first. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. See it right there. Now watch this. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive an inheritance, just like in verse 7, obeyed, and he went out, not knowing whither he went. Now, notice something in both verses here. In verse 8, it said Abraham obeyed. In verse 7, in order for Noah to move with fear and to prepare an ark, he had to obey God, which is what he did. So remember when we talked a week or so ago that it's not necessarily the preparations that saves you, that protects us. It's obedience. Well, here, it says here, Abraham obeyed, and we know Noah obeyed as well. He prepared, he moved with fear. Now, what is fear? Let's look at that for a quick second. If I go to Proverbs, keep your finger in Hebrews though. If I go to Proverbs 8:13, it says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogancy, and the evil way. And the froward mouth do I hate. So the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Back to Hebrews. I love this. I love the Bible in the way it just breaks down what we are to do. Okay, back to Hebrews 11:7. So Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world. So if you are going to obey God, it will go against the world. You will end up condemning the world. You will start condemning evil if you obey God. If you are removing sin out of your life, that will go against the world. And like it says here, he prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. So that says a lot about Noah right here, packed into this one verse and expounded with the next verse when it talks about Abraham. And by faith, Abraham, when he was called out to go into a place, which is what we are to do with country living, because it's not necessarily the country living that's going to protect us. It's obedience. And as we obey and we go where God would lead us to go, like Abraham, it says he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. So he wasn't even too sure where he was going, but he obeyed. And that is what protects us. Obedience is going to lead us into, it's going to lead us to righteousness by faith. And the righteousness by faith, that perfection of character, is our ark. Now, there's going to be elements in country living and so forth that's going to help build that ark of righteousness by faith. But we just have to trust God throughout the whole process. So it says Abraham, he obeyed and he went out not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. So he wasn't looking for a city down here. He was a citizen of the city above, and that's where he was looking, and that's why he dwelled in tents and so forth down here. And if you notice, verse 7, it says, Noah became heir of the righteousness by faith. In verse 8, Abraham received an inheritance. See, they're saying the same thing in different ways. And it's just kind of explaining the process of what they did and what we are to be doing now. The ark that is going to protect us through this, for the storm that's coming now, is that perfecting of character. Are we building that ark today? Are you building it? And are we obeying God, even though we may not know where we are going? Let us pray. Father, as we just looked at the Word of God, please help us to understand what you are calling us to do, and help us to do it to your name, honor, and glory, knowing that you will give every detail and instruction of how to build the ark. We just need to obey, and that you will take care and get us through that storm. Thank you for what you've done and what you're doing and what you will do. We appreciate you and love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen. So much to cover. And just real quick, let me just give you the headlines, and then we'll go into break and come back with this interview we wanted to share with you today. 6 cases of a rare polio-like illness diagnosed in Minnesota children. Golden vessel used in Jewish ceremony for the first time since the Second Temple. Britain stages biggest war games for 17 years with 5,500 troops while rehearsing cyber strike to black out Moscow. Iranian general vows to destroy Israel in furious attack. Strong aftershock rattles North Haiti day after deadly quake, death toll rising. Here's a developing story. Florida declares state of emergency ahead of dangerous hurricane. Top U.S. Admiral warns Russian submarine threat. Tropical storm Michael could reach hurricane strength before striking U.S. Gulf Coast. Widespread fish kill from hurricane will continue for weeks in North Carolina. Mystery object washes ashore on a South Carolina beach. At least 7 deaths and injuries confirmed in Haiti earthquake. And that's it for today. We're going to break, and we're coming back with an interview. You should invite some friends. It's a very good story. Tomorrow or Wednesday, we will cover Paris and whatever countries are getting involved in getting people to use bikes instead of cars to help with climate change. So we'll get into that. But stay tuned for this interview. We'll be back after the break. You're listening to SWM Radio, and we are back, and we have our special guest here with us. And this is going to be a treat, a blessing. This is a testimony I heard 2 weeks ago, well, almost about a week ago, 2 Sabbaths ago, though. And the testimony was shared by Gregory and Melogene Peharie. And they're with us right now, and I just want you to hear this story. Gregory, how are you?
Well, I'm not too bad. Fine, thank you.
Praise God. And you shared a story 2 Sabbaths ago that was very, very powerful. So why don't we start from the beginning so the listeners can hear this powerful experience. Let's start with your background, though. You are a Seventh-day Adventist today, but you weren't always a Seventh-day Adventist. I guess it was introduced to you when you at a very young age, correct?
Yes, it is.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, go ahead, tell that story.
Yes. It was about when I was about 9 years old that I joined the church. Back then, my mother also joined the church. At that point in time, I was baptized, and I spent about 3 years in the church. And after then, I become wayward, leave and was out there, in the world again. But, there was something that always struck me about my mother. She was always a caring woman. She was someone in the community. When anyone is sick, she's the first one that they will call. And I remember I was in the night, we live in the country. So this was a place where we did not have, cars that you could take someone to the hospital. But I remember, a particular incident where a lady, she took sick and they came to the house very late in the night with, back then we called bottle torch. It's a bottle with oil and wick. You use that to get light in order to find, because these were rural country. We did not have electricity there available. So, I remember they turned up at the house in the night, and she get out of her bed and she walked almost 3 miles to where her pastor was living, because he was the only one who really had a car back then in the 80s. And she get him and, he came over to took the individual to the hospital. This was the type of person that she was. Whenever, there's a death in any one family, she was one of the first person there. She's at every funeral. She's at every grave digging. This is the type of person that she is. And I watched that growing up. And I believe based on, my experience, what I encounter now in life, it helps me, basically that background, that what I've seen, it helped me basically to be the person that I am and to stand up to the responsibility that I believe now the Lord has placed on me.
Amen. Okay, so she became a Seventh-day Adventist.
Yes. So, after leaving the church, basically, for many years, it was in 1997, because back then I got, baptized, in 1982, 80, I think 6, 7, somewhere about there.
How old were you?
I was about 9 years old. So, and about 83, yeah. Thank you very much. Yes. So, after, many years of, being out there in 1997, I remember I recommitted my life to the Lord. I remember, before I really recommitted my life, I was out there in the world. I was just, going to party, all these places. But one thing I realized, I believe that the Lord really had a calling on my life. And I was really ignoring it. And I remember times when I will go to my bed and I will, have some serious nightmare that will, cause me to wake up in cold sweat, and, my heart will be pumping real hard. I will dream that, the place will be becoming real black and a lot of thunder, and, the Lord is coming, and I will wake up and shouting in my sleep, "Oh Lord, please don't come it. I'm not ready. But, as soon as, daylight and, the light is out, you totally forget what really the experience of the night. But each time it is coming back, night is coming, that fear of going to bed, it comes back to me, because I know what I was going to encounter. I will dream sometime as I close my eyes. I start to dream that something just took me from the earth and just lift me up and start to carry me in, bring me out in space, to start to take me, very fast. And somehow when it reached somewhere out there, just let me go and I start to fall. And it pulled, there's that fear, of you dying. And it really started getting to me. But I didn't really pay it any mind. So I remember it was a Friday evening that I was at a party. And I remember I went in to the party with some friend. And I bought, what then we call an Heineken. And I had it in my hand. And I went in and I stand in front the box, because here in Jamaica, when you go to what we call session or party, the sound, the music will be beating real hard. The bass will be jerking you. And I was someone who really loved that bass. I love to feel the jerk, that it jerks you inside. So I will stand in front of the box. And I remember I stand right in front of the box when it was beating. And I remember I felt like someone take a covering and put it over me. And I could not hear anything. As loud as those speaker was, I could not hear anything. anything I could only feel the bass. And I heard a voice said to me, Gregory, what are you doing here? You know better than this. And immediately that thing lifted. And when it lifted, the noise came back, but I was shaking like a leaf. And then I know I need to do something. I could not say anything to anybody. So immediately I just rush out of that place and I threw the Heineken in the bush and I went home and I went on my knees and I started praying. I still start praying, Lord, help me. And, that really set me, to said, Gregory, it's time for you to go back to church. And that's how I turned up at church. I did not hear a message or anything to pull me. It's just those experience. And I went to the church and I said to the elder, I need to get baptized. Just like that. I remember when the first elder, he came to my house and he said, I just come to, get, just to give you some, tips to find out, your background and stuff like that and to give you some Bible study. But, when he had that conversation with me and I speak with him, he recognized that I already knows the doctrine of the church. I already know everything. So he said, listen, you're ready. That's all right. And he prayed with me. And that was in 1997. So I got baptized. A week later, the baptism was set and I got baptized. And I started what I called my journey then. My wife also got baptized, I think, a few weeks later, also in 1997. And it was in 1998 that we met. And we...
At church.
At church. Right. We met at church and, we were courting basically, and we decided to get married. At that point, she was a legal, what we call a paralegal, one who works in law.
Okay.
So, she wanted to pursue her law degree. She wanted to become a lawyer. So that's what she wanted at that point in time. We got married. We planned to have children because, as I said, I grew up back there in the country where I had a lot of siblings. It was 7 of us. Plus we had, my father basically had 2 extra. So it was 9 of us there as children in the family. So, I grew up in a very large family setting, and to me it felt good. And I always love to have my sibling around, basically, because I don't know, there's something about growing with them that really give you a joy, memories.
Right.
And I always wanted children, a lot of children. So I entered in the relationship having 1. My wife also, she have 1. So we plan to have at least 4, with the 2 that we already 5. Thank you there. She's reminding me that it is 5 that we plan to have. So in 1999, we got married. And after we got married.
Now, what church was this?
It is the Sydenham Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Okay. And that's kind of like in Spanish Town.
That is in Spanish Town off the Old Arbor Road.
We're talking to Gregory Peharie, and he's sharing an incredible story. By the way, I didn't even know the part about the loudspeaker and you being at a party. I didn't hear that before. So, so I'm glad you added that just now. Okay, so you were met at church and you got married.
Yes.
And she was going to become a lawyer.
Yes. That's her dream.
Right.
So eventually, that's her dream basically. So we plan to have kids, and in the interim, while giving birth, she was she planned to go back to school, in pursuing her law degree. Mm-hmm. She got pregnant late 1999. So in 2000, it was in August of 2000 when she gave birth, and I remember after giving birth. Then, 1 month after giving birth, I remember it was a Sabbath morning, when she awoke and she said to me that, Gregory, I'm not feeling well. So I said, what's wrong with you? She said, I'm having shortness of breath and I'm having some pain up my spine and it's really getting bad. I need to go to the doctor. So I Said, all right, no problem. And I take her to a private doctor in the city at that point in time. So when we went to the doctor checked her, and he gave us a letter to go to the Spanish Town Hospital. We went to the Spanish Town Hospital. The doctor checked her, and they gave us, a number to go to the cashier to get registered. I get her registered, and we were told to have a seat and wait and listen for our names. We sat there and we were waiting for her name to be called. We sat almost 1 hour, and no one attended to us. She was getting worse because she was crying. She was crying a lot. I have her in my lap. She was there in my lap, her head, and I was trying to comfort her while she was crying with the pain that she was feeling. So nothing happened. I remember I said to a nurse that was passing, and I called the nurse and I said, what is happening? She's in a lot of pain. And she said, oh, what's her name? So I told the nurse her name, and she went over, look at the file, and she came back to us and she said, she's having an asthma attack. The doctor said that she's having an asthma attack. So she's waiting to go on the nebulizer. But they are all filled. So we would have to wait a little longer. Now, when she said that, it did not sound right to me. We were only married almost just a little over a year. And somehow, what I knew about her, I know she did not trouble with asthma. So something tells me that something was wrong with what she was saying. So I asked her again. I said to her, do you have asthma? She said, no, I don't have asthma. I've never had asthma in all my life. So I said, all right, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's wait and see what will take place. I waited another hour. Nothing happened. The breathing was getting bad, and the pain was getting more intense. She was crying. We did not know how long we had to wait more. So I take her and I brought her back to the doctor that looked at her in the beginning, at the first. And I told them what they said at the hospital. And he said, all right. He gave us some tablet and he said, okay, take her home, give her 2 of these tablets and give her some soup and allow her to get some rest. I did that and I followed that instruction. I take her home and I gave her the tablet, give her the soup, and I allow her to get some rest. It was about 2 o'clock when we went back home. She ate and she went to bed. About 4 o'clock, she woke up, and I remember when she woke up, she woke and she said to me in a very intense voice, a very frightening voice. She said, Gregory, I can't feel my leg and I can't move my leg. Now I stand up. I was lying on the bed, so I stand up and I walk over to her side of the bed. And she said, and I looked at her, so I touched her on her leg and I said, can you feel this? She said, no, I can't feel it. I said, move your leg. She said, I can't move it. So I said, this is serious. So I called my first elder and he rushed over, both he and his wife. And when they came, I stepped outside with him and I was explaining to him the proceeding that takes place during the day while his wife was inside, comforting her, trying to pray with her, to give her encouragement. About 10 minutes in our conversation, when I saw his wife came out and said, this is bad. It is getting worse. We need to get her to the hospital. They helped me to lift her, put her in the vehicle, and we take her to the hospital. We were there up until, this was about 5 o'clock in the evening, and we were there in the accident and emergency till about, it was about 11 o'clock in the night when they say they have to go home. So they prayed with us and they leave for home. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when they found a bed for her and they place her on a ward and I leave for home. I went home. And the next morning, I remember I called her family and they all came to the hospital and I went back there. When I went to the hospital, I realized that not only her legs this time cannot move and there's no feelings in her leg, but it is now from her waist down. So from her waist down, nothing could move. She has no feelings there, nothing at all. she was getting worse. Her breathing was getting more bad and more worse and worse. You know, she was just barely taking bits of breath. You know, very shallow breath she was taking. We spent the day with her and I leave for home again. It was a Monday morning when I turned up at the hospital. And when I turned up at the hospital, I remember I met one of her co-workers at the gate. And she was crying real intensively. And she was saying that Melo is going to die, you know, because, you know, she's Melo Jean, so they called her Melo. So she's saying, Melo is going to die. Melo is going to die. No, I just said to her, she's going to be all right. But I really could not deal with what she was saying.
Now, who's saying this again?
Our co-worker.
Her co-worker.
Yes, co-worker, yeah. Right.
Now,
So-
she's saying this because now Melo Jean is dealing with paralysis from her waist down,
Yes, but not, but
and the breathing's becoming labored.
But not only that, she had been there before I reached them on the morning. So she was seeing something that I was not seeing at that point in time. So that is the reason why she was saying the thing that she was saying. But I did not know until when I went in on the ward. When I went on the ward, I saw what she was seeing and why she was crying.
Okay.
Because when I went on the ward, not only there was no movement from her waist down, from her neck straight down to her legs were all dead. There was no movement, there was no feelings from here down.
From the neck
From her
down.
neck down was dead. Her hands could not move. Nothing here could move. She had no feelings. All was moving was just her eyes. She just could only move her eyes from left to right. She could not turn her neck nor anything. So this was what she was seeing. That's why she was crying. That's why she said she was going to die. But I did not see that when I met her. Is when I left her at the gate and went on the ward. Then I see what she was seeing. And I realized it become real panicking for me because now I believe that she was really going to die. But I was praying inside. I've always, my mother was one who was a praying woman. And I was praying inside. I was saying, Lord, this could never be what you put us together for. I could not believe that you really put us together just to take her away at this point in time. So I was praying in my mind. I was walking and I was praying. But something in me that gave me some level of comfort. There's something about when the Lord really give you that comfort that, you cannot explain it, but you can feel it inside. I can feel that level of comfort. And that is the comfort that I was feeling, that everything is going to be all right. I could not see how it's going to be all right. I did not know, but somehow I know it was going to be all right. So I looked at her and the doctor asked to see me. So I waited and they came over. So when they came over, basically they said to me that she needs to go to one of the major hospitals in the city. That is in Kingston. Is either KPH or the University Hospital. She needs to go because she needed the care of an intensive care unit to help her to breathe because everything is shutting down. Her lungs is shutting down. Her organ is shutting down. Everything inside is shutting down basically. And anytime now she can go into a cardiac arrest. The problem with that, they did not have any ambulance at the time at the hospital.
Have mercy.
They said, the doctor said to me that there are 2 ambulances that is assigned to the hospital. One was in the garage and one was all the way in St. Anne's Bay, that is in another parish, on a training mission. That one won't be back until the next day. So I remember I said to him, so can I take her in my car? He said, no, I cannot take her in my car because my car is not equipped to take a patient and he cannot assign a patient to my car. Not only that, a nurse will have to travel with her and he's responsible for the nurse that is going to travel with her. So he could not do that. So I said, what do we do then? I remember he just shook his shoulder and he said, let's see. And he walked out. When he walked out, I remember I stepped out of the hospital and I stepped out on the corridor and I was there praying. It was at that point I saw a family friend. She was a sister at that point at the hospital. A sister is one that is a matron. Isn't that so? Yes, one that we call a matron. She is in charge of, the nurses. in that sense. So, she was like a nurse supervisor, in that sense. So I remember she was a family friend. So I tried to call her, but those were the days when we did not have a cell phone. We only have an house phone. So if you were not at home, you would not get the call. So I tried to call her a few times and I did not get her. So I remember I met her and she said to me, she said, "Gregory, what are you doing here?" And I said, "My wife is in the hospital." And she said, "What? Why didn't you call me?" So I said, "I tried, but I did not get you." She said, "Let's go." We walked into the ward and she looked at her, she checked her file, she realized what was happening. I told her what the doctor said, what needed to happen. She said she knew about the ambulance situation. She said to me at that point, "Gregory, don't worry." She said, "Don't worry, I'm going to get an ambulance for you." And, this is how I believe that the Lord really, comes through. This is one of the first point when, that comforting feelings that you felt inside, you are now seeing the Lord coming through. Then I did not see it then, but looking back on the experience, I realize basically how the Lord has come through for us. So, she went to her office and I think about 15 minutes later, she came back and she said, "Don't worry, I got an ambulance for you. They will come and get her and take her to KPH. She said, not only that, the reason why I believe that this was the Lord that was at work, she was someone who works the night shift. So she worked from 8 in the night until 8 the morning. So she would have to go back home, get some sleep to come back to work 8 tonight. Now this was about 11 o'clock in the day, but she was still at the hospital. She said to me at that point in time, "I shouldn't have been here. I should have been home, sleeping in my bed so I could get some rest in order so I could come back to work tomorrow." And when I really look at that experience, I realize how good the Lord really is in really providing for us in a time when we really needed Him.
Amen.
So she get the ambulance and I think she went home, she rushed home, she said, "All right, called her and, let her know how things are going." And she left for home. It was about 2 o'clock when the ambulance came and they took her and they brought her to KPH Hospital in Kingston. She was admitted at that point at the nurses, right beside the nurses station, because she was very critical. She was a critical patient at that point in time. So she was there, and that's when they started the testing. They start to test everything that they can. They run all the blood tests. They test her hair, her urine. They went into her feces, right? They test her spine, went into the spine, take liquid out, the flesh, everything they tested. Eventually, they came back with a diagnosis that they call Guillain-Barré. The doctor explained to me at that point what Guillain-Barré was. He said it's a disease that started, you start losing sensation from your feet and it travel up to your neck. And when it is going away, it starts from your neck and it goes back down. It's like a fire that blazes up, but when it is going down, it starts from the top and it goes down. This is the explanation that he gave to us. However, the problem with that, the medication to treat it, it was not available here in Jamaica. It was only available in the state. At that point in time in 2000, it was very expensive. At that point, they explained to us that it's going to cost us over 10,000 US dollars, which at the time was over 300,000 Jamaican dollars. No, we did not have that kind of money. But again, we prayed. And through one of her sister from our workplace, she got a loan for us, which was an interest-free loan she got. And we were able to go to Lasco, which is one of the major provider of drugs in the country, basically. And we paid for it there, and they ship it from overseas to the hospital. They did that, and it reached the hospital, I think, in 2 weeks' time. In about a week time, it reached there, and they were able to give it to her. They give it to her, but she was still there. She was getting worse. She was not improving. They started doing all tests over and over again. Every day they will take blood and they will run different tests and they will check. I remember one day I turned up at the hospital. And when I turned up at the hospital, I remember, from a distance I could see her bed. And I looked and the bed was empty. And at that point in time, it really shook me inside. Because, been in the hospital now for a few weeks, I saw when the beds are empty and what caused them to be empty is either the patient has been discharged and sent home or the patient is dead. This is the only reason, or they transfer them to another bed. So that's the only way the bed will be empty without no sheet on it. And I remember I looked and there was no sheet on the bed. The bed was empty. And I remember my lines become loose. I really felt like I really need to go to the bathroom. My legs could not hold me. And I stopped for a minute and I prayed. And I talked to the Lord and I walked over to the nurse and I quietly whispered to her and I said, "Can you tell me where's the patient that was on that bed?" And I remember she looked at my face and she saw the distress. She said, "Don't worry." She smiled and she said, "She stopped breathing, but she's okay now. She's in the intensive care unit." She directed me there and I went there. She spent a week inside the intensive care unit and they take her back on the ward where she was. They place her back on the bed that she was and she spent another 3 weeks basically. So in total about 5 weeks that she spent there in the hospital. At the ending of the 5 week, I remember the consultant, when I went to the hospital, the nurse said that the consultant needed to speak to me. After visiting hours, I was there and he came over and he said to me at that point in time, he said, "Sir, your wife is not going to make it. She's going to die. Go home and call the family together. Discuss it with them. Call the funeral home of your choice. And when she's passed, what we will do is contact you. Then you can call the funeral home and they can come and claim the body." I turned to him at that point in time and I said, "Sir, the fact that you guys cannot do anything for her anymore, can you send her home to die?" At that point in time, I did not know why I did that. But again, there was this voice in my head that wanted me to do more, that wanted me to try stuff that I used to learn in the church, stuff that I remember, Dr. Morgan was one of those who I used to listen to in the earlier days. He was one who, will come in at AY and he will, speak about natural remedy. You will have a lot of people like, Ebanks and, a lot of medical missionary. They will comes in and in the evening and they will talk to us about, natural remedy, or we can use a natural thing to heal diseases. So I remember some of these things then, but I was never one who embraced it at the time. Because, back then, coming in the church, I was new to the health message. I did not understand anything about the health message at that point in time. So, I used to listen, to members who I came into the church to see, even elders, who I saw in the church, who I look up to. These were people who used to talk against the health message, who never had anything to do with it. And they will make suggestion, they will criticize those who were talking about it. They were talking about, they will say words like, these people are talking about, like health message is going to bring you to heaven. Or if you eat meat, you're not going to heaven. Things like this they will say, and they will, just criticize those, these people are preaching salvation through health. This was what they were engaging in. So I really listened to these things and I'm saying, that's true. How can these people, be talking this? So I was never one who was fond of the health message then. But now that I was in a situation and I recognized that the doctors, they could not do anything for her, I wanted to try some of these things. So when I make the decision to really take her out of the hospital, so I asked the doctor, "Can you send her home to die?" When the doctor said, "No problem, I can grant you that wish," no one really agrees with my decision. Everyone think I was crazy. They believe that, listen me, why are you doing this? This is the place for her to be, in the hospital. Why are you taking her? Are you a doctor? This was what they were asking. They were asking questions like, what do you plan to do? But somehow in my mind, the Lord was speaking to me, and I learned to listen to that still small voice that was keeping me quiet.
We're talking to Gregory Peharie, and he has an amazing testimony. And he mentioned Dr. Morgan, and Dr. Morgan is here with us. And I'm gonna bring him in to share in this story as well. Dr. Morgan, you can sit right here. You can sit right there.
What amazes me most with what Gregory is saying is, one, when we are sick, where do we expect to get help? At the hospital. Isn't that true? People expect you to get the best help there. And here, his wife was there for 5 weeks that he mentioned, until they told her what? Take her home, go home, make funeral arrangement, and when she's dead, you come and claim the body. At the hospital, the place that most of us look most, right? And most of us don't look to God, right? Secondly, what amazes me and jolts me, being a doctor, I find out that most people have more confidence, right, in us doctors than God. And I'm talking about especially Christians, right? Because here it is a situation where the doctor said, we cannot do nothing for you. And yet family members, friends, well-wishers, no, these are not bad people. Right. These are people who are looking out for his best interest and his wife's best interest in quote. But their confidence is so established in the medical system, not in God whatsoever, that to them it is better for her to die in the hospital, even though the doctor remain there and die, even though the doctor said they cannot do nothing for her, than for him to take her home and see what God can do for her. That is what really puzzles me, and I believe that hold that the medical system has on us need to be broken. We need to give up on it and trust God.
Amen. And that's from the doctor himself.
Yes.
Amazing. So the doctors, they're telling you, that there's nothing more they can do for her. And like Dr. Morgan said, a lot of people, we have our trust in humans. Rather than God who created us. So they asked you if you were a doctor.
Yes.
And you're not a doctor. What is your profession?
An auto mechanic.
Auto mechanic. But God told you to take her home.
Yes.
All right, go ahead. What happened after that?
Yes, I remember I take her home, and, leaving the hospital, I remember, they gave us a piece of card with a date on it that we should return to clinic 6 week time. So I took it and I went home. I know they did not, they were just only following protocol. They were just doing what was necessary, what they were, trained to do. So I take the piece of card and I went home. When I went home, all of that, that I used to remember, all the experience and the lesson that I've learned back then, it came back to my mind. And I remember one of the things that I've learned is that when someone is coming out of a long fast, you cannot give them anything hard to eat. They need to get something soft, So I went and get some soup for her. So I made some soup for her. So after making the soup, I came to the room. By then, my kids, one was only just over 2 months, basically. The other one was about 8-year-old, and the other one was about 4 at that point in time. So they were pretty young. I put them on the bed and let them turn their back. They sit side by side, and I place them on the bed and I turn their back, and then I will rest the pillow on them. Then I will take her and rest her on the pillow. So they will be the brace to hold her. Because she could not move. There's nothing that she could move. In order to get the food in her mouth, I would have to hold her jaw with my 2 fingers and squeeze her mouth open in order to get the food in, because her jaw, it was stiff. There was no movement. Her hand was stiff. Her whole body, it was stiff because she was literally dead. All she was doing was just making the little bits of breath was just coming out of her mouth. Her eyes was the only thing that was moving. Nothing else could move. She could not communicate nor anything. I remember when I opened her mouth, and when I looked in her mouth, I almost nearly cried. The dead flesh in her mouth was almost an inch thick. She had been in the hospital for all these weeks, and they have not opened her mouth and to clean her mouth or anything like that. The dead flesh on her tongue, all those taste receptacles that is on her tongue, all of them start deteriorating and lifting off the tongue. So it filled her mouth right up. So nothing could go in. I went to the kitchen and I warmed some water and I used a rag and I squeeze her mouth and I stick my hand to the corner of her jaw and push it as far back as possible and pull out the dead flesh. When I pull out, I think her tongue was coming out of her head. The amount of stuff that was coming out. When I pulled it out and it came out, when I tried to clean out as much, when I opened her throat and I look at the back of her throat, round there was filled, but I could not reach that. So I said, all right, the soup may bring it down. So I put a spoon of soup in her mouth. And when I put the spoon of soup in her mouth, I remember that little ball that is beneath your throat here. I have to rub it in order for the soup to go down because she could not swallow. She could not do anything. So I rub it and it went down. And when the soup went down, I remember she started gapping. She started to make some small gap. And when she started to make that gap, I remember the only thing I started to do is pray. And I started to pray in my mind and I was saying, Lord, please don't let this be it. Please don't let this be it. And I prayed and I prayed. Immediately I started to see some slime running from the side of her mouth. It just started to drain. So I went for a pail that we have, and I rested in front of her. Now this pail was almost 2 feet high. Basically, it was almost a feet in width. But you understand? This is a very large pail. I rested in front of her and she started throwing up. And when she threw up, the pail was half with all saliva and cold. It's the first in my life I've ever seen so much cold and water come out of someone's stomach like that. But that's all was coming up. And she just vomit. I went and I emptied it and I gave her another spoon of that soup to drink. And she bring it up back again and bring up some more. This time it was not as much as before. After that, I was able to give her the plate of soup and she was able to keep it down in that sense. After that, I will take her to the bathroom and I will, warm some water and I will place her in that warm water and I will massage her. I will massage the joint, massage her body all over, and I will just massage her body in the warm water, work it up. Then I will empty the warm water. I will keep her there in the water for about 15 minutes. Then I will empty that and I will, go to the fridge and I will get the ice and I will throw the ice in the water and I'll make some ice water and I repeat the same procedure. And I did that. Then I will put her in the bed and I will use some olive oil and I will massage her joints and, massage her body. Her hand was clutching so tight. Her finger, it was cutting in her skin. I remember when I opened her hands, inside her hand, it was stink. The flesh was deteriorating inside her hand middle. Everything was cutting. Her skin was basically, you could just hold it and just rip it apart. I tried as best as possible to clean it. Then I will fold the towel and I make it, I fold it, then I will stick it in her hand and allow her hand to clutch on it, to hold it. So the pressure that the finger is coming down with, it don't cut into the flesh. And that's what I would do. The next day I remember again, I want to say, the Lord again, come through for us one more time. There was another family friend who was visiting from the States. She was a nurse. So when she came down, she came on some business. She called me when she was in the island and she said she's here. She want to come and visit her. So I said, okay, no problem. You can let me know when you want to come and, I'll, take you to her. I did not hear from her. So that morning, I remember it was about 9 o'clock the morning when I saw her turn up at the gate and she was there to tell me, she said, Gregory, I really want to come and look for peaches, but I really did not get the time because, I was all over the place trying to get some business done and my time run out. I'm late for my flight even now. But I just say that I have to stop in order just to see how you were doing and to tell you to give her my regard. And so she stopped. And I remember when she said that, I said to her, she's inside. And she smiled and she said, what? And she rushed inside the house. When she was inside there, she was there, rubbing her legs and, encouraging her. But then I saw when she passed her hand on her tummy and she looked at me and she said, Gregory, when last has she urinated? And I said, from yesterday, I really don't see any urine. And she said, all of this is urine. She said, do you have a catheter? I said, I don't have a catheter. No, she was late for her flight. She was rushing to the airport. But just in that pinnacle of time, she rushed in the car and she head off. I don't know where she went, but I know she came back. She came back an hour later with a catheter and a needle. And she inserted that catheter. We had a basin and we used that basin. That basin is a very large basin. And when she released what was under her bladder, the basin was filled to the brim. It was more than 2 gallons of urine that came out of her bladder.
Wow.
At that point in time, her tummy went right down. She said, Gregory, if this had stayed in her just only a day more, she would not have a bladder anymore. It would have been ruptured. But the Lord again came through for us. The Lord prepared her there just in time. She was could only put it in, run out what was there. And she showed me and she said, all right, what you do every 45 minutes, you release it and release what is on her bladder. And then you use the needle to plug it back. And that's what we did. And she took off and headed to the airport. That's when I started, thinking, I remember I used to hear about the barley green. I heard about the carrot and the callaloo and the cabbage and all of these vegetables. So I went to the market and I will buy them and I will come back home and I started extracted the juice. So when I extracted and I will give it to her in the natural form, just as it is, no water. Because this was what I learned. This was the thing that I used to pick up then. And I realized that she started making improvement. The first thing that came back was the feelings from in her upper body. She started to feel it. Not only that, she started turning her neck. So this was what was happening. I remember someone said to me that we can take her to the Spanish Town Hospital at the physiotherapy department, where they have a physiotherapy department there, and we can get physiotherapy for her. So I remember I called the department that day and I got a physiotherapy. She said she'd do home visit. I said, okay, can you visit us at home? She said, no problem. I can do that. I remember when she turned up, again, I'm saying the Lord come through for us again. When she came, she was a 7-day Adventist. She was a 7-day Adventist. And she came to us. And when she came, I remember the first time when she came, she gave her some workout and she showed me the workout, how to work with her. So what she said, all right, what she will do is come 2 times for the week and she will teach me what to do and I can do it, during the day for her, even 2 or 3 times for the day. I remember I paid her that day. I remember the second day when she came, she did not take any money from us. Even though I insist on giving her the money, she said, no, I cannot take any money. And from that point, for almost more than 7 years, she have been coming to us and she have never taken a cent from us. And I know that must have been the Lord. No matter how much we become so close friend that she's like a part of the family now. That's all it is. She did not, and she taught me all of the move that I should use, the exercises and all of this. She teach me all of that and I could use it on her. I remember when the 6th week came around for her to go back to the doctor. At this point, she was using a walker. She was moving around. I remember when I turned up at that clinic that day, it was a sign. It was a sign to be seen. The doctor was there, the nurses, and all those who knew her, they were there. And they were puzzled. And they sat me down and they started questioning me. I felt like I was in an hot seat. And they were asking me all these questions, what have we done? Where have we brought her? Who looked at her? And I was saying, no one, I did it. And I was saying, I use all of this natural thing, and I was telling them about the barley green, about the vegetable, and, I tell them all of the stuff that I use, the hot and cold treatment. And I remember after that, we spent a while there with them. And eventually the doctor looked at me and he said, I never forget those words. He says, son, whatever you're doing, go home and do the same, because there's nothing we can do. There's no medication we can give her because we do not know what's wrong with her. And I went back home. So I went home and we practiced that treatment. But the thing about it, I was one who did not embrace the health message. I was one who was still using these treatment, these natural treatment, just as how anyone would use the drugs. It's just like you will, get a flu, or you will have an headache and you will go to the doctor. They will give you some drugs. What you will do basically is take that drugs. The headache will go away and you are all right, but you're going back to do the same thing, not knowing what gave you the headache in the first place, not doing anything different from the headache to reoccur. So it's the same thing that we were doing. We were using the natural remedy in the same form. We were not changing anything that we were doing. As soon as she could able to eat again, we started giving her the chicken. She started eating the fish. She started eating all of these things all over again. Soon as she started getting sick, we'll run to the natural remedy and we will get all of these stuff and we will give it to her in order to, get her, try to get her well again. I remember it was in 2001, she started getting another relapse. This time we tried all of the natural thing. It was not working. She was getting worse. I did not want her to go back in the hospital here. So I contacted my sister who was in the state at the time. She lives in Maryland and she works there as a nurse. I remember I contacted her and I said to her that she's getting sick. She said to me, can you get her up to me? I said, I don't know if I can, but I will try. I prayed and I asked the Lord. I said, Lord, if I'm going to do this, you will have to help me. I went to the travel agents and I spoke with them and I asked them, would they accept her on the plane in her condition? They said to me that they won't accept her on the plane. If she's sick, she would have to travel with a nurse. So that I would have to get a nurse in order for a nurse to go with her. I could not afford to send a nurse with her because it simply means that I would have to pay a nurse in order to travel with her, plus her ticket and plus boarding. I did not have that money. So I just say, all right, I'll just do it on my own. At that point, I could not travel with her because I did not have a visa. So I booked the ticket by faith, and I remember the day came. I booked it like 2 days in advance. So the day came when I went to the airport. I put her in 2 Pampers because I did not want her to mess up the plane. I did not want her, to pass her urine and then, they will realize that something is wrong because she could not move to the bathroom or anything. They would have to lift her on the plane. So I, brought her to the airport. I remember I buy at that point 6 Panadol. It was 6 Panadol that I bought. I put her in 3 Pampers and I dress her up. I brought her to the airport. And outside the airport, before I take her in to check her in, I gave her that 6 Panadol. No, I did not know I was giving her an overdose. It is now that I know that 6 Panadol is an overdose. But, the Lord said in time of ignorance, He winks.
Right.
And, I believe that the Lord was there with us.
Yes. So, all right, so we're going to leave that cliffhanger about what happened when she got on the plane.
Yes.
Let's come back tomorrow with that. And we're talking to Greg Peharie, and again, it's a wonderful testimony about his wife that was basically paralyzed from the neck down, and the power of God. So we're going to come back tomorrow, invite others to come in and to hear how this story played out tomorrow. What we're going to do now is go to a break, and then Pastor Bowen will bring us the morning manna. This is why we share these stories with you. This is what SWM Radio is all about. We want to share. How else would you hear this? You've got to see and understand the power of God. And we will bring more of that to you. We'll be back. You're listening to SWM WM Radio.